gathering from all over the country, as far away as the far Pacific, and then to hear Mona's beautiful voice there. We could end the evening right now, and what a wonderful time. I do want to make clear some before we really jump into this topic. First, that everyone knows that we are recording this meeting, and the other thing is that I don't think we should assume that everyone knows. Well, I'm going to be sharing some of the writings of Baha'u'llah and of Abdul Baha, and it would be good to make sure that everyone knows who Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha were. I don't want to assume that everyone knows those names. And if nothing else happens this evening, we should introduce those names to everyone. So Mona or Farsham, maybe Farsham, could you do that for us? Could you just, in very briefly, just tell us who was Baha'u'llah, where these writings come from, and Abdul Baha. I'm putting you on the spot because I know you are comfortable speaking like this.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's the best way to know Baha'u'llah is to know him through his own words. And he talks about how humanity over time is in need of divine educators. And like we as children grow up with the love and nurturing and education that comes from our teachers, especially if we've had good teachers like Roger, we, through their instruction and love and nurturing, we grow to become the best version of ourselves. And I think that Baha'u'llah talks about how divine educators do exactly the same thing, that divine educators come every time that humanity is in need of spiritual education, of spiritual inspiration. They come and bring teachings that will allow human beings to look at their life in a different way, to spiritualize and lay the foundation of a spiritual civilization. Abdul Baha also says, who is the eldest son of Baha'u'llah, that we have two kinds of civilization. We have material civilization, in which we have actually excelled in some ways, but that spiritual education is where we lag behind. The idea that we relate to one another around principles of justice, around principles of love and inclusivity. And Baha'u'llah explained his role as being that of inspiring humanity to basically to hear this call for a need for a divine civilization, and find in themselves these gems of spiritual reality, the gems that obviously the reason why so many of us are here is because Roger is so good at exemplifying those, and so many around the world love him and respect him. It's because I think that he has taken the message of Baha'u'llah to heart. And I think that this is the goal of every human being, to take the message of God in any at any time in history to heart, and become a personification of those values that those messengers of God or those divine educators bring. So just very briefly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And also just that this spiritualized civilization that Baha'u'llah is here to, came to help develop, is meant to be a global civilization. that it's not just one part of the world that is recipient of his teachings. It's meant for all mankind, and that would really be the hallmark of this spiritualized civilization, would be that it would truly reflect the oneness of mankind. So, so thank you, Farjan. And then there was also mentioned in some of the introductions this idea of books, that, you know, this is our book 8 group, and book 11, and you know, book 1. What are these books? So, okay, Linelma, I'm going to pick on you because I see you smiling, and and I know that you can give us just what do we mean by these books, and what's the purpose? Are these the books that
Yeah.
Baha'u'llah wrote?
No,
Okay.
these books were created to deepen and understand better the teachings on different subjects. And it was begun in actually Columbia, I think, with the Ruhi Institute. And now we have this, and these books are used worldwide in the Baha'i communities. And they started one, and that's on what's the name of that one? Spirit.
Reflections on the Life of the Spirit.
Yes, Reflections on the Life of the Spirit. And then it continues. The second one is Arise to Serve. So different subjects like that. And it's like a study guide, but they're all writings from the faith, from the Baha'i faith, and also writings of Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, and later Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith. And so, does that help, Roger?
Yes, yes, but let's make it clear though that this series of books, I would only add 2 things, Linelma. One is that it's not just for the Baha'i community.
No.
That this is a way for anyone who is interested in applying these principles for the betterment of their communities, for building community,
Yes,
and for the betterment of society, and to empower people to develop the resources to be able to bring about that spiritualized civilization. So, and it's a series of books. So, so that as you go through these books, your capacity for service increases. And it's not service to the Baha'i community, it's service to our neighborhoods, to our cities and towns. And so I'll mention this again at the end of my talk. So I just wanted to clarify those things. And so as Sharon said, this is kind of it could be a heavy topic, the life of the soul, because as we reflect, what we're really looking at is the question of our mortality and the possibility of our immortality. And especially during this time of the pandemic, and the US is approaching 500,000 victims of this disease. And so what is the meaning of this? When we reflect on our mortality, we're really reflecting on the meaning of life. And is this all there is? Is there something more than just this physical life? And if we were together in the same room, I would have a better, I would want to know a little bit of your stories. And we had a chance to introduce ourselves, but I think that we can all say that we have known someone dear to us, a loved one, a friend, a family member who has passed away recently, or or not so recently. And without maybe we won't take the time to go through all of those names, but I would like to ask you if you would please take a moment to think of who it is that you will be thinking of as we consider these writings and this topic. And maybe you can post it in the chat. Just type a name in the chat. There could just be a first name. It's just a chance for you to really think, who is it that you think of when you are pondering this question of our mortality, the end of our physical life, and the question of whether there is anything beyond that. I think that everyone knows how to use the chat. I see a lot of chat so far. Down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button for chat. So if you just click on that, and I'm going to stop talking so we can consider this a moment of silence. To draw those people close to us. I will type. I will. So there's so many names appearing here, and it's really just a moment. I should ask for a volunteer who might say a prayer for these souls, and then we can consider some questions about this. Is there anyone that could say a prayer on behalf of these souls?
I can say a prayer.
Thank you.
Oh my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, speller of affliction. Verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such that have abandoned this physical garment and have ascended to a spiritual world. O Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrow, and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter into the garden of happiness and cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold the splendors on the loftiest mount. Baha'u'llah.
I hope that we can keep these souls close to us tonight as we consider this question. Let me start by asking these two questions, just with a show of hands. Is there anyone here who has already been dead and can tell us what that's like? Is there anyone who's already had this experience of going to the next world and you know,
I think from what we hear, Roger, that the next world is so wonderful. If any of us had gone there, we wouldn't want to come
you
back.
wouldn't want to come back. That's what I've heard too. But here's the thing: since no one has ever come back, you know, apart from like you know, psychics or you know, the seances or near-death experiences, you know, no one has had that experience come back and reported to us. It's a mystery. There simply is no way for us to know what that next life is like. And as such, it's been a question throughout the ages for poets, for philosophers, artists, for the deep thinkers, the religious thinkers. Let me ask this question with a show of hands. How many of you are certain that someday you will end this life? Raise your hand if you know for sure that someday you will die. Come on, Ali, raise your hand. So these are questions that face all of us. There's no escape, and yet it is this deep, deep mystery. And it's the kind of thing that it may be that the reason for that mystery is that the things that we use to understand life, that we understand the universe, that we understand ourselves and our place in it, are associated with our bodies. We use our eyes to see, we use our hands to touch and to smell and to hear, and the brain, what we use to think about it. All of those things are associated with this life and this physical form. And when this physical form ends, we won't see with these eyes, we won't hear with these ears, and so on. And so this mystery of what is in the next life has very much to do with the mystery of what is our soul? What is it? What is the way that we have to know things without words and to see things without our senses? That's the life of the soul. So, but the point is that if it's, I'm going to have to, I think, Sharon, can I share screen? Hi.
Oakville community.
Are you all seeing
Yes.
these words?
Yes.
So this is the first question. If, you know, looking at all of those names that you typed in the chat, every time we lose a loved one, our first reaction is, it's so unfair. Why does this have to happen? So this is my first poem tonight. It seems so unfair, it's damnable. But for us all equally, it's inevitable. So don't fear to face the last predictable, for we all must pass through the impenetrable and discover what makes life inexplicable. What is essential is invisible. And have faith in what makes death incredible. This, what is invisible, is imperishable. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour as we look at this question of our physical life, the end of our physical life, and what comes beyond, by sharing a little of my story. These two beautiful faces. On the left is my brother Rick. On the right is my mother Nancy. Rick passed away 5 years ago from brain cancer. My mom died just 3 years ago. I look at these radiant faces and I think of this passage, this first hidden word of Baha'u'llah. These hidden words were written by Baha'u'llah, but he wrote them in the voice of God speaking to us. So he addresses us this way: O son of spirit, my first counsel is this: possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. Have you ever seen two faces more radiant than these? And I will tell you, there's no people more kind, more joyful, more loving. So to tell you a little bit more about my brother, this is Rick in his professional uniform. Rick was a clown. Rick was a professional clown. He clowned with Ringling Brothers Circus. He made a life career out of making others happy, bringing joy. And that was his gift. And the more he made other people happy, the more he became radiant himself. So, you know, when I think of my family members and the radiance in their faces, and think, has that light gone out from this world? And so I have to use some analogies, because you know the great teachers, the divine teachers, in order to help us understand this spiritual life that goes beyond the knowledge we have from words, you know, this, to see things that we can't see with our senses. They made great use of parables and metaphors, and my poetry is just a humble attempt in my own way to try to express that through metaphor. And one of the metaphors, so we're going to look at a number of different metaphors for the relationship between our soul in this life and our soul after death. And when I'm going to leave this hidden word here, if I can see their radiant faces and see that quotation. And I want you to think of this light, right? I mean, so just a flashlight. But I think you'll get my point here when I say that, you know, as my brother progressed through his brain cancer. At first, he lost his energy, then he lost his words, then he lost consciousness, all before he lost his life. And that radiance became dimmed during that whole process.
Mhm.
But here's this light, and I'm going to take this handkerchief, and can you still see the light? But little by little, as more and more of it is covered, that light is dimmed until eventually it's covered. But of course, you understand that that light has not been affected. The light itself was just veiled from those of us who depended on his words and his laughter and his conscious interaction with us for us to see it, okay? That soul was still vital, was still radiant, just hidden from us. Another analogy that you find in the writings of Abdul Baha is that of a mirror, okay? So if I shine this light on a mirror, if I hold, let's see, how am I holding this? You can't really see the light from the flashlight, but you see it in the mirror, okay? But if I take the mirror away, or if the mirror is broken, now you can't see the light. But reason tells us that that light is still shining, okay? So the idea is that our soul is the source of that radiance. And in this life, it shines through this physical means. But when our physical life comes to an end, that's like the mirror being broken. It doesn't affect the light. Or it's like the light being obscured by something that's opaque. We often talk about, those who have passed away as being beyond the veil. Okay? Or as this poem uses the idea of opacity, that opaqueness. And that this physical body can hide the luminosity of our soul, that radiance of our soul. The opacity of human skin that hides the luminosity within is, as I see now, old friend, temporary and necessarily thin, and thinner as time goes by, until with all translucency of sky, your hands, old friend, and face and eye unveil a light that will never die. So of course there are those who say, oh, but this experience that you call the soul and everything, it's just a function of the brain. And, when that ends, consciousness all comes to an end. That's the materialistic point of view that denies the existence of soul or the existence of life after death. And my argument to that is this picture. That's Rick, my brother, and that's me when we were little. And I think to myself, those children no longer exist. That physical form, this small child with inquisitive mind, energetic little feet, those children don't exist anymore. They don't exist. But the essence of who that was me. And this is still me, even though my body has undergone a lifetime of change. But the essence of what makes me me has been there all along. And this was my experience with Rick as his brain cancer progressed, as he lost his laughter, and then he lost his words, and even when he lost consciousness. We would sit together, and it was clear to me. It was abundantly clear that the essence of who Rick was still there. It was veiled from me. I couldn't really interact with him, but my brother was still there. And we were able to commune without words. Okay, I think I better move along here. I'm just going to read this part of this question. Of this quotation. If a body undergoes a change, the spirit need not be touched. When you break a glass on which the sun shines, like a mirror on which the sun shines, the glass is broken, but the sun still shines. If a cage containing a bird is destroyed, the bird is unharmed. If a lamp is broken, the flame can still burn bright. So these are metaphors that which is the essence of who we are, that part of me that makes me me, is unaffected by the changes and chances of this physical life, including the final change with the end of this physical body. Okay? My mother kind of went through the same thing. In her, after her passing, we realized that she had been having a series of small strokes that cost her memory little by little. And we came to realize this. She couldn't drive anymore because she couldn't remember the way home. She'd go out once or twice. She was out driving and couldn't find her way home. And one of the amusing things that happened to her, she kept getting these free samples of wrinkle creams and did not remember to cancel the orders. So month after month, she would be getting these wrinkle creams, very expensive wrinkle creams. And I looked at her one day and I said, "Mom, they ain't working." And but then I realized she needn't worry about that. So I wrote this poem for her. I can't believe you'd want to erase the lines that love has left on your face. The years of laughter and kindness have traced a record of smiles that can't be replaced. A beauty of soul no cream can efface, etched by a long life lived full of grace. I put this picture of Mom together with this hidden word. I'm doing all the talking. I wonder if I could call on someone. Shole, you're still here. Could I ask you to read this hidden word?
O Son of Being, thou art my lamp, and my light is in thee. Get thou from it thy radiance, and seek none other than me. For I have created thee rich, and have bountifully shed my favor upon thee.
So again, these words, these hidden words, are addressed to us as if God is speaking to us. So, thou art my lamp, and my light is in thee. That means the divine light, the light of God. That spiritual light is in us. And that's where we get our radiance. You know, I just learned, interestingly, this is kind of a side, but this word, you see these words, thou and thee. It's kind of a august way of speaking, I suppose. But I also learned that in the original language, Arabic and Persian, there are different words for when you're speaking to you as one person, as opposed to you as the whole group. So when it's translated, the translator uses the word thee when he's addressing one person, and thou signifies an individual. And when he's addressing a group, he uses the word you. So this is a very direct statement to each one of us individually, that that divine spark is in us. That's what we mean by soul. Firuz, perhaps you can read this.
O Son of Man, thou art my dominion, and my dominion perisheth not. Wherefore fearest thou thy perishing? Thou art my light, and my light shall never be extinguished. Why dost thou dread extinction? Thou art my glory, and my glory fadeth not. Thou art my robe, and my robe shall never be outworn. Abide then in thy love for me, that thou mayest find me in the realm of glory.
Why should we fear our perishing? Why should we dread our extinction? Whoop. Sharon, I wonder if you would read this hidden word.
Of course. O Son of the Supreme, I have made death a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve? I made the light to shed on thee its splendor. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom?
Death, a messenger of joy. This is a hard thing to get your head around. When I think of all of the names that were entered into the chat, I imagine that each one of us grieved at the loss of those souls. I saw grandparents mentioned, parents, a sister, a wife, a brother. And we don't lose these loved ones without a deep, deep sense of grief. And I want to, this just a short selection from Abdul Baha. He says, O thou beloved maidservant of God. This is a letter to a mother who had lost a child. And he said, although the loss of a son is indeed heartbreaking and beyond the limits of human endurance, that reunion, that is the reunion in the next life, shall be for eternity. While in this world separation is inevitable and bringeth with it a burning grief. So I think that Abdul Baha is acknowledging that when we lose a loved one, when we experience that separation from those who are dearest to us, it's only natural that we feel a burning grief beyond the limits of human endurance. But at the same time, these passages from Baha'u'llah, I think here he is addressing each one of us. When he addresses me, he's telling me, don't fear, not to fear my extinction. That he's made my death a messenger of joy to me. So here's another metaphor for this transition from physical life to the next life. This is from the House of Justice, the Universal House of Justice, the governing body of the Baha'is of the world. And they wrote, as at the time of death, the real and eternal self of man, his soul, abandons its physical garment to soar in the realms of God. We may compare the body to a vehicle which has been used for the journey through earthly life and no longer needed once the destination has been reached. So they compare our body to a physical garment and to a vehicle. So I don't think Baha'u'llah would have used a Winnebago in his writings. They didn't exist at his time, but here they're comparing our body to a vehicle. Okay? I like it, an RV or a trailer, a house trailer. You know, it's where we live. We travel through life in this vehicle, and you know, we better take care of it. We better fill it with gas to carry us on our journey. We should change the oil and rotate the tires so it'll keep going for a long, long time. But when we reach the destination, you don't want to hang out forever in this RV. You want to get out and enjoy your destination. It has served its purpose. So this is what they're saying is that our body is like the vehicle that we take care of. We need to keep it healthy as best we can for a long, long life of service and activity and learning and loving. And yet when we've reached our destination, we can abandon the vehicle. It's served its purpose. They also compared it to a physical garment, our body as a physical garment. So I wore, on purpose, I wore my flannel shirt here for this poem, Old Clothes. I'm comfortable in the clothes I've been in so long, they've become like second skin. Soft flannel shirt and faded denim, as worn and frayed as the body that's in them. Now my body is as comfortable to my soul as these old clothes. And if truth be told, it's hard to say where soul turns to skin. It's all just a garment for what lives within. So when old clothes are torn and tattered, cast them aside. That's not what has mattered. And when the old body is tattered and torn, it is not as important as the soul that has worn it. You know, I better pause at this point just to see if there are questions. And just, I might encourage people to use the chat if you have questions or comments, especially questions. And in fact, if I don't answer your questions, maybe someone who's paying attention to the chat can answer those questions. Fair enough? But let me pause here. Any thoughts or questions at this point?
You're recording this, Roger?
Well, I'm not. The host is recording it.
So the
So,
host is recording this?
yes.
Is there any way I can get
There are other metaphors in the writings that help us to understand this passage from physical life to the life without this physical body. And one of those we saw earlier was that if there's a bird in a cage and the cage is broken, it doesn't affect the bird. In fact, if the cage is broken, then the bird is even freer to fly. So this is my next poem for you about the uncaged bird. A little bird lives in its cage where all of its needs are met. Water to drink and seeds to eat and a perch on which to sit. The little bird inside its cage may chirp its song and delight and flit about from perch to perch in an imitation of flight. Until one day the master comes to open the cage's door and calls out softly to the bird, inviting her to soar. But the little bird, oddly enough, flaps around in fear, stricken with terror at the thought of leaving her nest so dear. And so the gentle master must reach in to the open cage and take the bird into his hand, and thus her fears assuage. Then, in a brief, grief-stricken moment of terrifying transition, the master brings the trembling bird to her new uncaged position. And oh, the wonder of the instant when the bird begins to see that the hand that briefly restrained her wings is the hand that set her free. Shiva, is that you here?
Yes, it is.
Could I ask you to read this? These are Abdul Baha's words that express that same analogy.
Sure. To consider that after the death of the body, the spirit perishes is like imagining that a bird in a cage will be destroyed. If the cage is broken, though, the bird has nothing to fear from the destruction of the cage. Our body is like the cage, and the spirit is like the bird. We see that without the cage, this bird flies in the world of sleep. Therefore, if the cage becomes broken, the bird will continue and exist. Its feelings will be even more powerful, its perceptions greater, and its happiness increased. In truth, for the thankful birds, there is no paradise greater than freedom from the cage. Abdul Baha, some answered questions.
So he's telling us that we don't have to fear our perishing, that that the end of our bodily life is a moment when our spirit will be freed. We'll have even more spiritual powers. We'll have more perceptions. Its perceptions greater. Its happiness increased. Okay? But I think this is also reassuring when we think of those for whom we grieve, that we can console ourselves in thinking that although we are separated from them by the physical senses that we use in this life, that their spirits not only continue but are freer and in a realm of greater happiness. And it's not even necessarily far away from us. It's not as if they go off to some other part of the universe. This is an analogy that I use to try to understand this, okay? And I wrote a poem about this, but I won't indulge you. I'll keep it short here. So here's my pencil. Here's the paper. This paper is just two-dimensional. As long as the pencil is in contact with the paper, it makes a line, right? But as soon as the pencil is lifted off the paper, it's still there. It's still moving. In fact, it can move in more dimensions. But it's not leaving its mark on this dimension, on this paper. I like to think of the souls of my family members that have passed on as having just lifted their pencils off the paper, and they're still close, even though they're not necessarily leaving a mark on my senses, on my perception. Let me draw this to a close with the last metaphor, which I think is such a powerful metaphor for understanding the relationship between our soul in this life and our soul in the next life. And that is the metaphor of the child in the womb. That in the same way that the child in the womb is developing limbs and organs in preparation for this life, but it has no use for those limbs in the womb. It can't conceive of how those limbs and organs will be used. And when it comes to the moment of birth, that could be a very traumatic passage, frightening for that baby. What's going on? What's going on? And yet, once born into this world, he sees that it's a much greater world than where he was to begin with. I tried to capture that idea in this poem, After Requisite Days. And in this poem, I also tried to capture that sense that I had with my brother, that as his brain deteriorated because of the cancer, his soul became even more present, more palpable. And I'm sorry, I was just thinking about Rick. Let me just read the poem. In a dark and sightless space, a warm and watery world, an embryonic person grows in fetal comfort curled. He sucks his strangely opposable thumb that hasn't yet anything to clasp, and tucks the folds of a growing brain that hasn't yet anything to grasp. Arms he has like folded wings, with nothing yet to hold, with eyes to see and nothing to see, and ears that hear no story told. And in the comfort of that world, that garden of placental bliss, no wonder that the fetus thinks there is no other life but this. But when the requisite days have passed, comes a day that seems like death. When cut off from his umbilical world, he wails and takes first breath. He enters an undiscovered land, a world of sound and sight, discarding the once sustaining cord, trading placenta for newfound light. And so, my brother, as we near the end of our requisite days, this thought calms my natural fear, changing sorrow and grief to praise. That the world we'll soon be born to will be as different as this world from womb. And the end of life in this life speaks more of rebirth than of tomb. Then, discarding the placenta of senses and cutting the cord of words, senses and words that have nourished our souls in preparation for spiritual worlds, we'll exit one realm and enter the next, wailing perhaps at what seems like death, realizing perhaps that heaven's air is love and will take first breath. For the loves we learn in this life must be as fetal eyes are to light, learning what's known without words and seeing what's seen without sight. So for now, let's live our requisite days in joy and love and care, to be ready to use our spiritual lungs when born into heaven's air. I tried to capture that idea that our senses, our brains, it was like when Rick was he was losing his brain and he lost the ability to use words. And it made me realize this brain is just a machine that processes our senses, and in humans, processes our words. So when we lose that brain, when we die, this brain, this organ will decompose, will no longer function. We will no longer use senses. We will no longer use words. So in my times when I was sitting with Rick, that's where I tried to find that communion with him, without words, without senses, just being totally with him. And in the years since his passing, I can still feel that presence. When I silence my mind, some people call it meditation, when I draw deep into my spiritual self and reach out without words, I can connect. And I think that that is the experience, that is the realm in which we must be able to connect with those greater spiritual beings. connecting perhaps in some minuscule way with the spirit, with the divine spirit, so that we don't have to wait until the next world to experience that spiritual reality. And that the love that we experience in this life, that is a power, that love is a spiritual power that will last into the next life. That the loves that we learn to express in this life, that's like the fetal eyes. The fetus has no use for those eyes in that dark, watery world. And yet it needs to develop those eyes. So the love that we're experiencing in this life, that's the power, that's the tool that we will use. That's the attribute, or the way our souls will function in the next world. And so the more we do in this life to develop our capacity for love, the better our souls will be prepared for that next life. So when we think of this, the journey of the soul, we've been talking about life after death. But the meaning of that discussion, what does it mean for us in this life? So I'd like to open up the discussion here to the thoughts of those of us gathered here. What are some ways in which we develop those qualities and attributes and strengths of our soul, of our spirit, which will survive after the death of our bodies? If we're like the fetus, growing, preparing for birth into the next life, what are the qualities that we need to develop here that will carry us into that next life? And how can we strengthen those qualities? So I'm going to stop the share for the moment so that we can all see each other, and just unmute yourself if you have a thought. Before we end, I do want to let people know, leave people with, a way of continuing this study. I'm going to close out my portion. Let me go back to the screen share. I have one more poem to share, which kind of connects the soul after death with the soul we carry in our little RVs in this life. So you remember this quote: "I have made death a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve?" So that's the inspiration for this poem. Whence comes this joy? This joy that makes of death a friend, not an enemy, but the messenger of new life at the end. What is this light? This lighthouse that shines upon my soul, ablaze in this my darkest hour to guide me toward my goal. What is this hope? This new hope that gives my soul some peace, that though my body is failing, my spirit will never cease. What is this grace? Amazing grace that taught this to my heart, the new start that comes at the end, and the end that's been there from the start. What is this beauty? A beauty both ancient and eternal, reflected in the face of love, both outward and internal. What is this love? Oh, love that's been here all along, come weakness, illness, or even death. Love is forever strong. This, then, my joy, the joy I'll sing till my last breath, of light, hope, grace, and beauty, of love that outlives death.
Well, Roger, I think there's a lot of applause all around. Is this one more that we're reading, or that was, oh, you're going to mention one more thing?
Just to mention, I can leave this on the screen. Just some online resources for more information about the faith. But I also wanted to bring up this book. This is book 1 of the Ruhi Institute series of books. This one on Reflections on the Life of the Spirit talks about studying that spiritual DNA, the guidance of the writings. It talks about prayer, and it talks about the journey of the soul in this life and in the next. And if you're wanting information on that, you can contact any of these websites to find communities that are doing these study circles. They're open to everyone. And here's my shameless plug for my book, which you can get through the Baha'i Distribution Service or on Amazon. And but then
allow me to plug your book for you, at least, Roger. So, Roger, I think we would be drawn toward. No, we want to see the Imperishable.
Oh, okay.
This is just so beautiful. I have to plug your book for you. That is my job online here. And so this has been so inspiring. And I know a lot of us were deep in thought, thinking of our loved ones. There was a big list of those that have touched their lives, and you shared this very close connection, especially with your brother, and how it has allowed you to use, draw from the writings and create the beautiful poem. So Imperishable, Amazon, or on the Baha'i Distribution Service. Sorry, did I cut you off? Did you want to say something else?
I just had a closing prayer, if that's appropriate, unless there's any other comments or questions before we wrap things up. We started by thinking of those who were dear to us that we grieve for. And I would ask for a volunteer to read this prayer for those souls that have gone to the next world.
Deming, I don't know if I can put you on the spot, dear. Would you like to read it for us? She was our beautiful host last week, and I would love it if you could please read the prayer for us, Deming. She's doing book
sure.
with us, and here's a prayer. Thank you, Deming.
You're welcome. O my God, verily the servant humble before the majesty of the divine supremacy, lowly at the door of the oneness, has believed in thee, and the verses have testified to the word, has been enkindled with the fire of the love, has been immersed in the depths of the ocean of the knowledge, has been attracted by the breezes, has relied upon his supplications to thee, and hath been assured of the pardon and forgiveness. He has abandoned this mortal life and has flown to the kingdom of immortality, yearning for the favor of greeting thee. O Lord, glorifying his station, shelter him under the pavilion of the cause him to enter the glorious paradise, and perpetuate his existence in thine exalted rose garden, that he may plunge into the sea of light in a world of mysteries. Verily, thou art the generous, the powerful, the forgiver, and the bestower. A prayer of Oakville Baha'is.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.